interpreter. Tiene que salirse, I say again. The box store managers want him out. This is the second time today, one of them says, I think he just sleeps here in the back aisles. Señor, I plead now, Señor. And this time he comes to his feet swaying like the New Year's pendulum. Pero no, he retorts, shouting, no, es que yo no tengo malas mañas. Not at all, the box store managers explain. They don't think he's stealing. But I know they'll call the police anyway. And so I ask a man who's now gone back to lying on the floor one more time, Señor. Pues pégame, he shouts, pégame. Well then, hit me. This has always been my job. While out getting a dish rack like today, or waiting in line at the metro, or crossing the street after a car accident, or shopping for food, the impartial stranger. Once I had to talk down a suicidal junkie and get her inside an ambulance after 5 cops, 2 of them bilingual, had tried. Landing in the middle of everything was a duty assigned to me at birth. And one of my unspoken agreements all along that it could be so if it need be so. Landing in the middle of everything was a duty assigned to me at birth. Even when all is said and done and it's time for me to leave, leaving is a pebble resounding in the hollow of my belly. Their suffering, my suffering, a sound I carry everywhere.
Muchísimas gracias, Naomi Ayala, por tu regalo de poesía. Thank you so much, Naomi, for your beautiful poems. Muy buenas noches. Gracias. Y bienvenidos al Teatro Gala. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to GALA Theatre. We want to thank you for attending this evening's event, Empower, educating more people on women's empowering roles. I'm Heather McKay, and I'm the Education Director for GALA Theatre, and I'm so happy to welcome you here tonight. On behalf of Youth Voices Transforming Communities, in collaboration with the Afro Latino Institute, Diverse City Fund, and the Mayor's Office on Latino Affairs, as well as GALA Theatre, I want to invite you to celebrate Women's History Month. Today and every day, we honor and acknowledge the women who have forged paths in many fields for themselves and for others to follow. In the past, we've looked to our mothers' gardens and their kitchens, and we still do. But women's creativity now fills every field, from boardrooms to classrooms to delivery rooms, on stages, on pages, and in homes and the hallways of power. Tonight, we women as creators gather here to share our experiences, our perspectives, and perhaps a pearl or two of wisdom. Women's identities are complex and intersectional, and our creativity and creations are as diverse as we are. Once again, thank you so much for coming this evening. We welcome you to GALA Theatre, and we hope that when you leave, you feel more empowered. Thank you. Before I step off stage, I'd just like to let everyone know that tonight's event is being filmed and will be made available to every participant, and will also be available online for those who were not able to attend this evening.
Each time a woman stands up for herself, without knowing it, possibly without claiming it, she stands up for all women. Such profound and powerful words shared with us by poet laureate and civil rights activist Maya Angelou. Hello everybody, my name is Mila Field-Zayas. I'm a member of Youth Voices Transforming Communities, a program coordinated by the Afro Latino Institute and funded by Diversity Fund. I'm also currently an art student at Howard University in my sophomore year. The plight faced by women in predominantly male-dominated society has been long and arduous. Despite both the invisible and blatant obstacles that we encounter along our way, we continue to forge ahead, creating new paths toward women's empowerment. The shared individual experience of our panelists will help to educate us and provide us with the fortitude to continue designing our own impactful destiny. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce to you Dr. Asiha Cort, an assistant professor of Afro-Latino Studies and Social Movements in the Latin American Studies program at Bucknell University, who will moderate this evening's dynamic and insightful discussion with a panel of our strong and accomplished women. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everybody. Oh, I have a mic. Never mind. My name is Dr. Asiha Cort. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you all for being here this evening. Very excited for this conversation. It's going to be great. Give me a moment. I would like to introduce our panelists to you one by one. Our first panelist is Samira Benitez, who's the Executive Director of the Diversity Fund. He's very excited as well. Or she. She. Okay. Our next panelist is Hillary Binder Avias, who is the Development Consultant for Refugees Congress Organization. Our next panelist is Monica Palacio, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Discovery Partners. Our next panelist is Salina Pandya, who is the Strategic Advisor and Grant-Making Specialist of the Meyer Foundation. And our final panelist is Halima Roebuck, who is the Supervisory Program Management Analyst of the Health Resources and Services Administration. So we're going to settle in for a nice conversation. We have about an hour to talk about these very, very, very accomplished women. You can come too if you want. You can come. We have about an hour. Then we have about 30 minutes for Q&A from the audience. So we look forward to Okay. The first question that I have for you guys is just taking a moment to reflect back on your trajectory, career-wise, personal-wise. What have been some challenges that you faced and overcome, and what work remains in your respective fields?
Okay. Is it on? No. Here.
It's on? Okay.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. So there was a lot in that question, but I'm going to try to remember everything here. So my background's in sociology, but I've taken sort of a meandering path to where I am right now, which is in organizational development. Started in public relations, working for a women-owned small business firm. Then moved into the healthcare space, working for a maternal and child care center in health IT, which I don't have a background in health IT. So for all the young people here, don't feel like you have to be locked into maybe what you had before, but being able to apply those skills in other spaces. And then ultimately moving into policy and then working for the federal government. And so my experience feels unique. It shouldn't be, but Most of my career, I've worked for women-owned organizations, women-led organizations that are in the business of uplifting women, bringing access to care or services to women and other underrepresented groups. And so for me, as a young person moving into the professional work experience, it just felt normal, but I realized that it wasn't normal to be coached and mentored by women who had really become their own entrepreneurs. And so now that I'm in this new space in the federal government, which I've been for the last 10 years, it's been important for me to be a possibility to show folks what's out there, that you can be a young leader, and that you have a responsibility to both mentor, and not just on the surface, but really showing folks, come to my office, let's talk about it. What are your goals? Let's network, let's get you in touch with different people, etc. So, and I'll stop there. I know we have to talk about challenges, but I'll pass them on.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be on this panel with so many with all familiar faces. Like Halima, I have also had kind of a meandering pathway. I often will describe when people ask me about my journey, I'll do this, right? Because it's sort of been like that. I first came to DC after college. I'm not from here originally. And I learned about the Latin American Youth Center and got involved there, doing a lot of different things. And really, that's where I kind of gained, met my teachers and my mentors, and developed my sense of commitment to this is my home, and whatever I do here, I want it to be about ensuring that everyone here has access to what they need to thrive, right, and to be their full selves. And I've kind of, throughout my career, tried to figure out where do I do that and how do I do that. And mostly it's ended up being also working with nonprofit organizations in organizational development, with community-based organizations, and really, kind of doing that behind the scenes work to say, well, if organizations have what they need to be strong and sustainable and be able to raise money and do their programs and these missions of bringing about justice and increasing access to resources for people. So I've kind of chosen to be there in my field. I also do a lot of work in the community with sort of arts and culture and creating spaces for people to make their voices heard that way, and really, being there, claiming their right to have a presence and a voice in the city. And much of that has taken place here in GALA Theatre over the years. And so, I guess I'll get to challenges too. But I guess the other thing, like you, so many of the organizations I've worked at have been led by women. Most of my dearest colleagues in this field and in this work are women. And most of the organizations I work with now, and a lot of the young executive directors I've been sort of supporting and mentoring, are women. And so I think that's because we do what we do, and we're going to change things.
Pretty cool, huh? So I'm Monica. It's great to be with you. I'm just gonna say, that I'm here because of my mother. Like, when I think about how I got here, why I got here, who I am, every fiber of my being represents the sacrifices she made, the struggles she faced, and the fact that she didn't let sexism or patriarchy stop me. That she said, you can do whatever you want, you can go to school, you can be a lawyer. Because when I was 9 years old, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. But no one in my family had ever been a lawyer. And no one in my family had even gone to college in the United States. My mother had studied in Colombia, but nobody else had. So she's the one that said to me, if you believe it, you can do it. And unfortunately, I think I was lucky, because we're talking about the 1970s in New York City, and a Colombian immigrant family that was poor, right? I didn't come from a Latin American line of wealthy people, because when people look at me, they think, well, it is Blanquita, you probably had so much money and privilege. I'm like, well, I had white skin privilege, but no money. There was no money. So I think that the story is that my mother gave me the path to do what I wanted, and every time I meet a woman, I grab her and bring her with me.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Monica. Hi, everyone. Hola a todos. My name is Sapna. I know the introduction was given as me being at Meyer Foundation, which I will talk about. But as far as the journey and sort of the different hats that I think I'm wearing, I'd like to talk about some others that kind of have inspired me to be all the different things that I am. And, you know, like you, Monica, I would say that I'm here because of my mother, but not necessarily because she said you can do whatever. Because I think actually she too had that framework of women are supposed to do this, this, and this, and men are supposed to do this, this, and this. She always encouraged me to work hard and study hard and all of that. However, I think one of the, I'm jumping to challenges, I'm sorry, but one of the things is I feel women, and what I saw was there are some frameworks within which we're supposed to be operating. And for me, as the child of Indian immigrants, my parents came to DC. Actually, I was born in DC. They came here in the 1970s, 60s and 70s. Being in a middle-class Indian immigrant family, my path was supposed to be that I'm supposed to be a doctor. That was really the only, and I know it's a stereotype, but 1 in 6 doctors in the US are Indian, and that was what I was supposed to be. And that was really the only option I was given, right? Is this is what you're supposed to do. So I was on that path. I was pre-med, on the way to med school, all of that. And actually something that I think defines me and my understanding of what it is to be a woman is actually to break those expectations, to break the molds, right? And that was the first mold I broke, and it seems like a funny mold perhaps to break, but to divert from that expected career path and to say, no, that's not me. I really was drawn to doing work with and for community, and not that being a doctor can't be that, but I wanted to do public health, and that was my initial sort of career entree to my work, was doing public health work. And I just wanted to note that I think along the way it has always been women, both cis women and trans women, that have led the way for me to do the work that I do, that have inspired me. One story that I want to share about why I am now here at the Meyer Foundation is because when I was in New York for 5 years, right after 9/11, and working with the Pakistani immigrant community there, and a lot of the women were basically in this state where their husbands had been put into detention, had been deported, it was a really terrible time to be Muslim, it still is, in post 9/11 era. And at that time, these women were really struggling with, how do I access my bank account? How do I get my kid form to get, sign my kid's form to get on the bus to go to school? How do I, all the things that you have to do to manage your day-to-day. I came in there with my public health hat on, with my lovely translated into Urdu from the American Cancer Society fact sheets on breast cancer and cervical cancer, and you should get a mammogram, and you should get a pap smear, and I did this whole workshop, and I thought I was so great, like giving the language appropriate information, the culturally appropriate information to this group of women, and they all sat there, to their credit, smiling, nodding, sounds great, and at the end, they finally said to me, Baji, which means big sister, Baji, actually, we want to talk about immigration, because all of what you said is very important, but she doesn't have papers, and you're telling us to go to the hospital. We're afraid she's going to get deported tomorrow. That's a bigger fear for us, right? It just was another reminder that to speak up, to break the mold, to say, I know you're telling me that I'm supposed to be here for this, but actually I'm telling you I need to be here for that. And that was really important for me. That was very a pivotal moment in my career to say we must listen to the people who are most impacted by all the injustices to direct where we're supposed to go, right? So, and it was this group of women that I'll never forget that I had that conversation with.
I was a little concerned that my answer was going to be a yes and type of answer, so I'm so glad that Sadna went before me. My name is Danira Benitez. My pronouns are she, hers, I'm a cisgender woman who, my journey. It's a long journey, and I like to say that I'm here for many things. There's a lot of positive things in my life, but I like to say that I'm here because of really, really bad international policy. I'm Salvadorian, so you'll know what's happening in El Salvador, a very long, bloody civil war. I always wonder what would I be if I was in El Salvador, right? So, but here I am. Being an executive director of a nonprofit organization that fights racial justice for it. It didn't start that way. I came here as a youth, 30-year-old, straight to high school, went to Wilson, which is now rightly renamed Jackson Reed High School. Went a little bit to Elizabeth as well, and I was there as a kid, trying to learn English and figure out what I'm gonna do in this really big city, this district that doesn't really welcome folks like us, right? And one of the things that I learned after being Hija de la Guerra, daughter of war, is that the war over there was visual. You could see it. You could see what was happening. You could see who were your enemies, who were the people that were trying to harm you. When I got here, everything looked so shiny, so awesome, so great, and a lot of good things happened. Don't get me wrong, like I really appreciate being here. But one of the things that I realized is that now the harms were not as visual. It was not rifles. It was not people that looked like they were gonna threaten you. It was now policy, right? Legislation. Like it was like friendly people, like seemingly friendly people, saying there's all of these different resources, right? All of these different resources, but they look so good on paper. They're there and accessible, right? So at a very early age, I started learning about like, wow, this city is so rich, it looks so rich, but then when you try to access different resources, which I did do often a lot of that for different difficulties, the difficulties that that many of us face when you come here and you are, poor, you live in apartments that are just packed with housing code violations, with things that are not safe for you and your family to live in, or family dysfunction that happens because of poverty and because of, we don't have access to different things that can help us have life affirming life. So I quickly learned that I needed to learn how to navigate different systems, and I got really good at that. And I realized that many of my neighbors, many of my communities didn't know how to do that. So I early on became a tenant organizer and worked with thousands of families in DC to figure out ways in which I could keep them in home, in their apartment buildings, and I got really good at that. But the work was just monumental. It was just monumental. When we talk about, saying this is such a beautiful place, and you start thinking about like what DC has and like what's really behind the walls, you realize that the infrastructure there is not really to support the communities that are most harmed by different social issues, right? So I realized that while apparently DC is one of the most beautiful cities, a lot of people were getting pushed out, including immigrants, brown, black tenants, working black community members that just, it was easier for them to move out, or the landlords were actively trying to move them out because why? Condominiums are more profitable, right? And so I realized quickly that those issues were actively pushing people out, and the infrastructure in the community wasn't there to really support maintaining people in this city. Quick example, there were about 900,000 is the number of people that lived in DC in 2010 when I was doing tenant organizing. There were about like 90,000 rent control apartment buildings, apartment units in the buildings that only had about a dozen paid organizers trying to prevent displacement. That's too much for 12 individuals trying to help communities, prevent harm, prevent people being displaced. And I was doing everything that I could with everything that I could do, and I quickly realized that the nonprofit system was very challenging to be an organizer and do what you need to do to help communities without pissing off the people that give you money to do that work, right? If the government is giving you money, if corporations are giving you money, they're gonna be like, why are you protesting at this and so's houses, right? So I quickly realized that it was gonna be very difficult to do my work, and even though my organization was an amazing organization, they had no idea whatsoever how to work with organizers that were trying to prevent these monumental issues, right? These very difficult, long-rooted issues. And so after 5 years of trying to prevent displacement and trying to look at like the actual legislation in the district, and that being like so tiring, exhausting, 60 hours a week, working with as much resources as we could, as much love as we could do it, because this work requires love. I got burned out. I got so burned out, I was like, I am done with this, I cannot do this anymore. But instead of leaving the nonprofit community, what I did is like, you know what? If there aren't any allies in the nonprofit community, if there aren't any folks that are moving resources to these individuals that are actually looking at the issues and saying, we need to solve this at the root, what I decided to do is I went and got me a fancy master's in nonprofit management and leadership, and I said, you know what? If there isn't anyone there to help, then I'm going to become that person that helps organizers, right? So I did that, went to California, did my thing, enjoyed the beaches of San Diego, and then after I was done with the master's, I came back and I started figuring out. I was like, let me see what's going on here. Let me see what I can do. I worked in government for a little bit. It was broke my heart because there wasn't that fire for the community. There wasn't that love for the community, right? And it was sad. There was a moment, once I switched to the legislative side, it gave me hope. It gave me hope because it was like, we're actively looking at the legislation and saying, okay, on paper this looks good. Like, for example, ERA, Emergency Rental Assistance Program. On paper we get $7 million for the community. But those $7 million go away quickly. Like in 3 months, that's gone because that's a need in the community, right? So I realized that more needed to happen, and it just happens that Diversity Fund, which is a nonprofit organization, it's a funder that gives money to people, to organizers that are doing systems change work, that are looking at issues and saying, how can we solve issues? We're community-led, so that means that we tell the community, we have all of this money to give out to organizers. Please go ahead and make those decisions on our behalf. And that's how we're here. You all heard that Diversity Fund funded this effort. This is some of the things that we do. So I'll leave it there. I know I talk a lot. I cannot lie in here. I usually tell people when I talk too much that Spanish has 30% more words. I can do that. You all speak Spanish, and you all know that I'm just talking and talking. So that is not.
For sharing your background and your trajectory and giving us some insight into how amazing you all are. A question that I had for something that came up, a point that came up in maybe 3 or 4 of you all's trajectory, the conversation or the note that you all made about reaching back as you climb, right? Could one or two of you just talk about, in your own advancement, how you either benefited from or provided that kind of assistance to other women who were ahead of you, coming behind you? And if you did get that help, how has that impacted you moving forward? I like to give you all loaded questions.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, so, you know, we're all here because of our lived experiences, and so I guess mine are probably more, to answer your question, more at a micro level, but in every single professional experience I've had, whether I sought it out or others within the organization thought I would be a good fit for that, I was always partnered with young emerging women, specifically, that were just starting their careers. And I probably was only 5 years older than them or 7 years older than them. But what happens when you're a young supervisor in different spaces? The possibility of assuming that role becomes very real to younger folks who are just starting in their careers. In addition to them saying, all right, I have access to this person, I know this is a possibility, I don't have to wait until I'm 50, I can be in this role at 28 or 30 or 35. You also have a responsibility to share with them sort of those decision-making spaces, so bringing them into those meetings where decisions are made, where programs are developed, sharing with them how office politics can really can have a significant role in how you advance within organizations, and then also trying to share with them how to network in a way that's meaningful. I think networking gets a bad rap sometimes, especially with younger folks. You know, it just feels like a chore, it feels fake, it feels unnecessary. You know, I'm here for the work. You know, people are gonna see how well I'm doing and my levels of commitment, and that should be enough. And, you know, somehow my star is gonna shine, but it doesn't work that way. You really absolutely need to be connected to people who have the authority, who have the visibility to really bring your dream, your vision into fruition. And so I've just always been a leader at every, you know, whether I'm 5 years old, you know, out playing on the playground, or if I'm in a boardroom, I've always had that. And so there is, like I said, they've always partnered me with younger folks, and I've had affinity for them. I get letters from them as they advance within their careers, and then they become partners, right? So the cycle, it just sort of evolves. And so, again, I started with saying there's a micro level element to this, where on the one hand, you can be in charge of programs that really sort of impact women as a whole, but then you can have those smaller moments where you're impacting future leaders, and whether that's 1 or 5 or 10 or 20, it's really, really significant. So I just, you know, just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, I can move on to the next one.
I can share something as well. I think it was really nice this evening to be greeted by all the young people that were here, because I think that's one way, again, with another hat on. Before being at Meyer Foundation, I was a director of a nonprofit here in La Mamplesa, in Mount Pleasant, right nearby, called Many Languages, One Voice. And we, the organization still exists. I left as executive director to really focus on actually being a parent to my 5.5-year-old now daughter. So again, in terms of influencing the next generation, I'm trying to be now a role model for my daughter as well. But the organization, Many Languages, One Voice, Mil Idiomas, Una Voz, we work with young not we anymore, they work with young people, young immigrants. And it was in particular, for me, very satisfying to work with all of the young women who had recently immigrated. I saw, even though I was born in the United States, I saw in them, English was not my first language, even though I was born in the United States. I was raised mostly by my grandparents who didn't speak English, and so Gujarati was my first language. So I saw a lot of the young me, like in these young people, also especially the ones actually that were bilingual, that are holding the burden of being the interpreter. And not necessarily, my parents actually speak English, but they speak with an Indian accent, and in many spaces they were not understood or they felt not understood. And for both of those reasons, I came in as the go-between. And also because it's like, well, you were born here, you understand the systems. Like, even with college, when I was applying to college, it's such a different system than India. And I remember my parents saying, well, we don't really understand it. And I'm like, I don't really understand it. I mean, how am I supposed to know? I'm a high school student myself. So figuring all of that out and holding the burden of having to be that guide for your parents is something I saw, especially in a lot of the young women that I was working with. And they were organizing, to Tamira's point, to really change the system, both the system of expectation that they have as young women of the roles they're supposed to be playing, and also the systems that were holding them back from, for example, some of the young women that I remember working with, they came from parts of Latin America, from parts of East Africa, from Asia, and they would come with credits from their high school from back home, right? Like the classes that they've already taken. But here in the DC public school system, those credits were not being recognized. So even though they should have been in, third or fourth year high school, they were put back to be first year high school again. And it's very frustrating to be a 17-year-old in a group, in a classroom full of 14 and 15-year-olds, or, and so they were not really into their studies, they weren't really focusing, and also they were frustrated because they wanted to graduate and go on to work or college or whatever they were going to do next. So it was really tough, and they actually went to the DC Council and also to the mayor's office and DC Public Schools officials and said, this is not right. Like, we as immigrant students are being held back in a way that we shouldn't be, and change that. They themselves changed that, and I helped, I feel like, to, again, continuously cheer them on, but allow them to lead and allow their voices to really be heard in that, because it was them that were trying to change their realities for the future. So, I just wanted to share.
I can say something quickly about doors being open. I think we both benefit from doors being open for ourselves, as I'm hearing, but I also think that not just leaving doors open. Let me see what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is, like, doors will continue to be open. It's not that you get to one level and that's it. Like, you've opened the doors that you open. You'll continue opening doors. People will continue to open doors for you as well. I think that about, like, my organizing experience was how to be in the background, because I've always been in the background. That has been my main thing. It's like, how do I help people be their own advocates, be what they do, be the person that advocates for themselves. So we're talking about people that may not speak English, may not know how to read, how to write. How do you put them in front of developers, in front of homeowners, in front of multi-billion building owners, and say, we're not leaving and you're not pushing us out, right? How do you build that? Right now, as an executive director, I am so lucky, so blessed to have a community of board instigator members that have, Sapna is one of them, and I see Bridget here, another one that is here with us, surrounding me and helping me become the best executive director that I can be. And I had a lot of fears about becoming an executive director for many reasons. Number one is, am I too young to do this? Number two, I have an accent. I sound like an outsider to the folks that I may be working with, and do they really want to trust me with their money? And a lot of different things. You know, I don't stay quiet. I piss a lot of people off because I tell them what's going on, right? So, yeah, I'm like, can I do this? And just having folks, having leaders like the women, the individuals that surround me to do this type of work is amazing. And for me, as a community member, has always been like, how can I leave this organization so that the next executive director, the next person that is going to be a first-time executive director, the next person that shouldn't really be an executive director in traditional philanthropy becomes an executive director? How do I do that? How do I do that work? So it's doors. You just don't open a door and leave it. It's just like you just continue opening doors and you continue walking through the doors that people that cisgender women, transgender women are leaving for you, or individuals are leaving for you. So yeah, it's not a straight line. It's all over the place, and there's a lot of walking through doors and windows and cracks and everything that you walk through. So
yeah, thank you. Speaking on the different identities that we all occupy, we're all examples of intersectional identities and multi-layered identities, right? A question that I have for you all, thinking about your trajectories, where you're at now, how you show up day to day. How do you show up in the spaces that you occupy, not just in work, also in your community, with respect to your multiple identities?
I can start since I have the mic as well. I show up in the space that I am in. I am so lucky that I can show up as my full self. Everything from being an immigrant cisgender woman with an accent, to having a beautiful wife that is sitting in the audience here, to just struggling with debilitating health conditions, to just being someone who's very annoyed, government officials, the institutions that have like stolen so much money from Black and brown communities, to just being someone who loves gardening and loves bringing fresh vegetables and fruits from my garden, as a daughter that has a distance relationship with her mom, as a sister that will do anything for her sisters, and just as someone who really is transitioning from saying, I am going to dedicate every hour, every single minute of my life to ensure that systemic issues are fixed, are addressed by the communities that should be addressing them, to realizing that the folks before me are getting super sick because that's exactly what they did, and they did not. They're very sick, and they never got a chance to enjoy life, to enjoy that liberation that we're trying to reach. And I'm making that transition of saying like, oof. Like, I really need to take care of myself, right? I really need to take care of myself and be human and enjoy the liberation that I'm trying to get our communities to. And it's difficult because it's like that, like keep going, never stop. You're sick, work through the sickness. You are tired, you can sleep when you're dead. Things like that, right? Those are the things that, in traditional organizing, that's how you do. That's how you do, because there's very little resources, there's very little time, and there's centuries of ish, let me not say the full word, centuries of things. And there's not there's not much that we can do about it, right? Well, there is a lot that we can do about it. But how do we do that in a way that doesn't take away our full life? That's where I am. So I'm struggling every day to figure out how to be the best executive director that I can, but to also be human in all the places that I'm needed to be human, in my community, in my household, and in other spaces where I show up. So
I was gonna jump in that I think there's a connection between what I'm experiencing as a 55-year-old Latina mother, wife, organizer, activist, all the identities I've had. When you get older as a woman, you have more permission, I think, to sort of set things on fire, which is great, as long as you have a fire hydrant. So I think I'm growing into that, and the sexism is different. Because now society's like, well, you don't reproduce, right? You don't look like the women on the magazines anymore, right? You're not the ideal human for men to consume, right? Whatever that is. So there's a different level of sexism and, kind of disgusting consumerism that hits you as a female as you're getting older. So I wanted to say that because I feel like that's how I'm showing up right now in all my identities/personalities. But also there's a fight that you have to fight as a woman every day, right? There's just a fight you have your mind, to have your space, to have access to other spaces. And that is a fight, I think, that I've accepted, as an honorary badge almost. But I wonder, when is the fight gonna stop? Right? When is it gonna stop? And it's different for me because I don't present as, Latin American to everybody. Pero si me pongo a hablar español con mi hijo, todos me miran y me preguntan, but where are you from? Oh my God. What is your name? Were you born there? All of a sudden I'm interrogated for no, I'm not kidding, for half an hour at the supermarket. No matter where I am, I get interrogated. And it's okay. It's okay because I've decided to be an educator in that way. But there is a fight to have, and when you see another woman fighting, fight with her. You know what I mean? Help her. Jump in and say, yes, it sucks. Yes, it's a fight. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Let's go. Right? Let's go. Don't give up. And just, I feel like that's the thing that sometimes we just have to give ourselves as women permission to openly fight and openly say, you know what, I don't want to be part of this anymore. Forget you, I'm out of here. And I leave a lot of places. That's sort of that's my thing. But I also stay, right? I stay. Oh yeah, I did that. It wasn't enough. The fight isn't here anymore. And I'm gonna go fight somewhere else, and that's okay. That's what it is.
I think one thing I was going to share is that I don't know when this started for me, but I feel like I often show up in spaces constantly thinking about who's not there. And I think, it's the different identities, as you mentioned. I, in many spaces, occupy a marginalized identity. There are not a lot of Indian and Pakistani immigrants in DC, and I speak Spanish, so in a lot of spaces, yo puedo entrar, yo puedo comprender, yo puedo hablar, y todos dicen que yo parecía un poquito dominicana, apparently, and so everyone always just assumes that. And so I get to sit there, estoy hablando, estoy comunicando y todo con todas las personas, and then someone's like, oh, ¿de dónde eres? I'm like, yo soy de la India. I'm like, India? And it just stops, and that is my entry point, but it's my way of entering and then saying, but wait, there's more. There are more of us. There are other identities here that you may see me as something, but I'm actually something else. And it's important to name that. And I think that that's, kind of similar, to your point of how you're perceived and then having to, define yourself otherwise. So that's one thing. And also that within the South Asian context, right, I also have different privileges that I walk with. I mentioned before about economic privilege and being middle class and, growing up middle class and always thinking about what about the people that
are working in the grocery stores or driving the cabs or working at the corner store, and they can't. I remember when I moved to New York, it was for the 5 years that I was there, it was to work with Indian, Pakistani, and Bangladeshi immigrants to help them get health care and etc. And my parents' friends here in the DC area were so confused because they were like, but we're all rich. They didn't say rich, they said, well, we don't really need help. I mean, who needs help? We all have access to health care and we're all doctors ourselves, you know? So they were so confused. They hadn't seen that there are other parts of our communities. All of our communities have, that. And of course, being, queer myself, I got to shout out my beautiful wife also, because you shouted out yours. And my daughter as well, who's there, a gorgeous, adorable daughter, and who's hiding, who's embarrassed. We as queer women too, I think I'm not perceived as such because I present as a femme woman, and so in a lot of times I enter into, especially my South Asian spaces, and people assume and they'll say, "Where's your husband?" And I say, "Actually, my wife is parking the car," or something like that. And I'm trying to do it. Sometimes people take offense or kind of get taken aback by something like that. I'm not doing it to insult you. I'm doing it actually, as you said, educator. I'm doing it to actually inform and to say there's more to what you see. There are queer women like me who you are perceiving as straight, but that's actually not what I am, right? And so I hold that privilege of being perceived as straight, and I walk into those spaces, and also being cisgender and having the privilege of being cisgender, as well. And then the last one I'll mention is the fact that I'm Hindu, and in my community, in the Indian community, that is identity of privilege, and that not only that I'm Hindu, but I'm also from an upper caste, and that is evident in my last name. And so I can enter into a space, and people from my community read my name, immediately know that I'm upper caste and that I'm Hindu. And so I try to use that opportunity to explain that there are other communities, other castes, other religions, other faith groups, etc. as well. As an example, Mount Pleasant is having its first Holi celebration this weekend. While it is very exciting, it is not being organized by Hindus and by people from the South Asian community, right? There's a couple neighbors that are in it. They reached out to me to be part of the planning of it, but the flyer was already put together, and the flyer defines the holiday as an Indian holiday and as a Hindu holiday. And I take issue with that for a few reasons, because it is perpetuating the narrative of the holiday that is only held by the upper caste and the more dominant groups. Because that is what's mainstream in the US. That is what is dominant in the US. And so that gets perpetuated and perpetuated. So the work we have to constantly do is to push back on the dominant and to say, there are others here also, right? They're not in the room perhaps right now, but they are here also, and let's not forget them. So I think as a woman, it's, yes, see another woman, fight with her, but maybe you don't even see her, and still fight with her, still speak about her, bring her into the space, even if she's not here. And so yeah, that's what I wanted to share as well. Thank you.
So as a white woman, cisgender woman with class privilege, education privilege, health privilege, I'm continuously questioning, how am I showing up, right? How am I showing up in spaces? What is my role in that space? I also chose to do something with my life that was not the trajectory that my family had for me, that my parents had for me. And so, I decided, when I came here and I found a community, I found teachers and mentors and work that was meaningful, and said, I want to stay. Like, this is home, and I've been here, more than 35 years now, continuously, like working with the community. And it's always, I never stopped. Like, I never stopped learning, I never stopped questioning. And I thank so many colleagues here who have taught me so much, who have, I think, you just been in support in like pushing back when I need to be pushed back on, and encouraging and supporting in ways that I think have allowed me to use my privilege. You know, like when do I step back, right? And so much of what I try to do is create space and be that sort of create the space and that encouragement from like the door's open, like, you know, okay, do you need a little push to get through it? Like what support do you need to get through that door? And when do I open the doors, right? And when do I like step up and speak out using, you know, my privilege as a white woman? So it's something it's a continuous questioning for me. I never stop reflecting on, and I thank a lot of people here for helping me in that journey.
I'll make it really brief. You initially talked about, you know, that all of us sort of sit at the intersection of a lot of different things. And so born and raised in DC, family from the Caribbean, so Black, Latina, DC native, went to a historically Black college, all women. And I think the sort of advantages of being your authentic self and recognizing the benefits of sitting at that intersection is that you can ultimately connect and move in spaces, and that ability to have shared experiences, shared cultures, that in and of itself is a starting line that a lot of people don't have. And so I always think of it as an advantage that I have. You know, if I'm in a space with other African American women and I talk about, you know, I went to Spelman College, that's a starting point, and it sort of moves you into spaces that you might not have access to. As a woman who's Caribbean, and you're talking about your experiences, your food, the language, the leaders, it moves you into spaces. And so I think there's a lot of advantages to that. It should be used, again, to create connections. You sort of have, you sort of like get rid of all the small talk and all the things that you need to kind of get to that comfortable space to talk about the business of work or to create relationships. And so I would just say that sitting at that intersection has so many advantages, and I celebrate those all the time. And I see them as a way for me to connect and to support others. And then also there's a trust level that people see you as not the outsider, and that they see you as an advocate. And not all people who look like you and have the same backgrounds as you are your advocates. So, you know, put that out there too. But I celebrate it all the time. And what it also does is it means that you understand folks. So if someone has an accent, you don't have those biases about what their experiences would be. If you see a woman in a leadership position, because I, you know, went to a school with all women, celebrated all women, you don't see that as a disadvantage. So, yeah, I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. I'd like to kind of push us forward, shift gears a little bit, especially because I'm looking at my clock and nobody's told me to stop yet, but we're getting close to our hour. Thinking about present times and then moving into the future. Recent news, global scale, we look at issues that are affecting women in the United States and Latin America, whether it's reproductive rights, pay equity, general healthcare issues, ongoing discussions of gender roles and expectations. I can go on and on and on and on and on. These are not new stories, right? We look at legislation, recent and past. We look at the conversations that we're having, the cases that are coming up. How do you confront these issues in your work, in your community? And then the second part, because I like to layer these forward, in terms of programming, whether it's legislative and or community work, do you foresee or hope to see a shift in the tide of recent development for women either in the United States or Latin America?
I'm not holding my breath. I don't see things changing for the better anytime soon. I'm sorry, unless we can't even elect a woman to be president of the United States. Like I feel like we've been set back. We're going to be set back, and so the organizing has to happen on the front line. You know, like all of us together every day, talking to each other on the corner, in the grocery store, at the laundromat. I don't care where you are. We just have to talk to each other about how to gain momentum and gain power in a way that challenges all the power structures that we know, because it is set up against us as women. And if you're a woman of color, and if you're a woman who's, you know, naturalized citizen, undocumented citizen, you know, citizen with different status, you have even more disadvantages in a country that is now building the walls to keep us out. So.
I talk too much,
Yeah, so there are definitely these are interesting times. You know, whenever you hear someone say interesting, you should always think red flag, red flag. But so I work in the federal government. I work under the Department of Health and Human Services. The Health Resources and Services Administration sits under that. And so, you know, Black maternal mortality issues is huge. It's a public health crisis. Hate to use developing countries because that in and of itself has its own things there. But, you know, we're failing. We're failing as a country. I have a 4-year-old. And I remember going in and, you know, I've been in public health. I used to work for a health center that was in Mary Center, which was a maternal and child. Well, at that point, it was just maternal and child care, but is now the whole life cycle of care. But I had a real fear, and remember going into the appointments with my OBGYN and saying, "Listen, I know you know the statistics. I cannot die. You better make sure that I have a healthy birth and I don't die." Now, why would I feel like I needed to get that out there up front? She was a white woman, and I just didn't trust that without saying that and communicating that that's at the forefront of my mind is to live, that it wouldn't be taken seriously. And so those are the kinds of conversations that people have to have if they have the courage to do that, because, you know, someone else might walk into a space with their OBGYN knowing that something doesn't feel right about that conversation, their questions weren't being asked, their symptoms that they're, you know, sharing aren't really being taken seriously, and that can lead to some serious health outcomes that, you know, unfortunately can lead to death. So in that space, and then we've got the whole, you know, women's reproductive rights issues, which we see that the clocks are ticking back in state after state after state. And all of it can feel very overwhelming. Where I work now, we're in the business of supplying the public health workforce, both on the faculty side of the house, but also on direct patient care. And so it gives me hope that there are agencies within the federal government that care about providing care regardless of your status, regardless of your ability to pay, which are real barriers for people accessing care, that we're in the business of trying to, you know, through that training pipeline, bring a diversity in the types of providers and clinicians that are there, so that when people show up for their appointments, they see people that are like them, that are from those communities that they're from, that have experiences. And that in and of itself can be that thing that changes how healthy you are because you see yourself in that person. So there's a lot of work to do. It can feel overwhelming. I do feel proud of the work that we're doing within the organization that I work with in the federal government, but there are a lot of things that we're not getting right, and that's really because we always have to stay connected to the voices of lived experiences. The data absolutely supports, sort of how we are good stewards of federal dollars, but we have to couple that with what's going on the ground. What are we hearing from our practitioners? What are we hearing from our patients? And who are the voices that we aren't hearing from, and how do we get access to those? And why are they afraid to speak out? And why are they afraid to, access care, et cetera? So lots of challenges there, but I do feel like I have a space in the work that I do every day and the programs that I support, or the federal employees that I support that are managing these programs, and knowing that we are making a difference. Tens of thousands of patients, healthcare centers across the United States, providing behavioral health, providing OBGYN care, midwifery care, dental care, just pediatrics. So just the despair can feel real, but sometimes it's important to just really celebrate where you are making a difference and voicing that and trying to get the support to continue those efforts.
I really disagree with that, because I think, going back, I know there's like all the frustrations and challenges we have with the nonprofit sector, and yet, right, like there's people, that is a vehicle through which people are making change. And there's small changes happening everywhere around the country, and I try to stay focused on those, and and I think it's like, how do we get more resources, right, to those organizations that are led by people who are directly impacted by climate justice, by reproductive justice. I mean, all of the things that are going backwards in so many ways, and like these organizations have like the salute, like they know what to do, and they don't have the resources. And thank goodness DC has the diversity fund that is, that said, no, like that's who we have to get resources to, not these big, institutions. So I try to just hold on to that, and I feel so grateful to know so many people who are on, who are organizing and who are, and also just, I work with a network of community colleges that are supporting people to get certificates and degrees in organizing, and with actual earned experience this is actually in California, working in community-based organizations, and can earn up to $15,000 as a community college student working in a community-based organization. And with their, so like, they're going to be the future. They're the future. They're the now and they're the future. And so how do we just, and I, folks in the audience, I just try to really stay focused on that, and which goes back to like, we got to open the doors, we got to encourage, we got to believe, we can support people to believe in their own capabilities to affect change.
You set me up perfectly, because I was going to try to lift up some of the groups in DC, at least that I know about, that are trying to change the tide. Because even with some of the resources that do exist in DC, right, like healthcare still costs, period. Healthcare still costs money. It shouldn't in this day and age. We cannot be, there's no way that, it still boggles my mind that we're apparently a developed country, quote unquote, again, and we have to pay to see the doctor. And wait, on top of that, wait 3, 4, 5 months, however long. I remember when I first called to get my OB, my new OB here in DC, and I called in March, and they said you can see her in November. And I said, but what? And I have a cousin in Canada, and she was like, yeah, we have free healthcare, but we really have to wait. And I was like, yeah, but you have free healthcare. We have to wait, and then we have to pay. So the point is, yes, our resources are here, but they're not accessible to everyone. And
and I don't mean to I want to be hopeful, but also at the same time, I think that that's, it's only getting worse, unfortunately, right? It's not, it's that part of it's getting more and more expensive. It's getting harder and harder to see the doctor you want to see. I'm just talking about healthcare right now, but insert any other issue in that, right? But the groups here in DC, what I have the privilege to do now is to work at a foundation that gives money, because that's my whole intent and purpose, is to get all that money out the door, right? And the Meyer Foundation is an old, massive foundation that is really trying to turn the ship and only gives out 5% of the corpus. And even with that, I get to look over proposals that are like $2 million worth of grants going out to groups in DC, which is an extremely privileged position I feel like I hold, to really look at which groups are doing the work. So I just want to shout out this group called Black Women Thriving East of the River. And Black Women Thriving East of the River is doing amazing work with Black women east of the river around health disparities, around creating opportunities in healthcare for women to enter healthcare industries. There's a group called DC Girls Coalition, which is entirely led and run by young Black women, and queer and trans and straight and cis and everything all in between, right? But they are coming up with the solutions. For example, they just got a bill passed in DC to lower the age of consent to 16, so that 16 and 17-year-old young women can take control over their own bodily autonomy and make decisions in healthcare, for example, right? Which is extremely important. So to your point about reproductive rights, that's a huge part of it. And the DC Girls Coalition is doing just that work. Those are two groups that I'm just calling out right now. There's several. There's one more group that I should mention, which is the Love and Community Incubator, which is working with vendedoras, with women that are working and owning their own businesses to really take control over their own fate and destiny, right? Because yes, we can try to change the system, but while we're waiting for that system to change, we also need to, I'm going to quote Maurice Cook from Surrey City War 6. He's like, we talk about power in the streets, but what if you don't have power in your fridge? You can't work, you can't go on day to day if you can't feed your children, feed yourself, pay your rent, etc., etc. And so we need to give those resources and also build alternatives while we're trying to change the system. And the Love and Community Incubator is another one of those groups that's doing that. They lend money also to cooperativos, groups that are trying to own their own businesses and their own wealth building for the future as well. So I know we have more, but I can talk about this too, about how we're trying to get the money out the door into the hands of the people making change.
I'll just throw in one more before I transition to you setting me up really well for what I was going to say. This is why we're in partnership. And for Budget Coalition, we have a $19.78 billion budget in DC. That's a lot of pupusas, if anyone. So it's a lot of money. But yeah, we still have a lot of issues. For Budget Coalition works with many of those organizations that were mentioned to ensure that very wealthy budget becomes a moral document that really addresses the issues that our communities are facing. What you set me up for is, the question brought up a lot of overwhelming, it's a lot of overwhelmed, right? And the thing is, I'm really good at being overwhelmed and getting out of that. So I'll tell you two quick things on how, it's all of these issues may feel distant to some, all of these issues may feel very close to y'all, to some of you that are doing the work. Number one is let's switch from talking about access to talking about autonomy, right? That's number one. Access is cool and awesome. It's good that we get access to some resources, but we need to have autonomy over how we have control of our lifestyle, right? That's number one. And autonomy, I also think about the autonomy that you can do, the things that you can do to be able to support yourself, your immediate communities, and the communities that you don't even know yet but are being affected by the same issues. When I got frustrated with being an organizer, my autonomy was, let me go get a degree because this is the language that people talk here, and let me make sure that I become that person that helps the organizers get the resources and get access to the spaces that they need to be to do their thing, right? Their thing meaning address the systemic issues at the root. The other thing that needs to happen is that we need to understand that this is for the long haul. We need to know that this means that the harm that we're experiencing has been going on forever, since the beginning, because who set up the systems, who keeps the systems, who maintains the systems, even if it's, like La Compañera was saying here, even if there are people that look like us, if the systems are being maintained to harm us, to harm some folks and benefit others, we're gonna continue being here, right? So we're here for the long haul. We have very little resources, but we have resources, but we have the survival instinct that we've always had. But also, please insert some joy in there, because we need to have that. I'm learning that experience, right? I'm learning that ability. But yeah, like reframe how we think about this. Get it wrong, but then think about what you have autonomy to do. Then prepare yourself. We're here for the long haul, so we're gonna do what we need to do, pace ourselves, but also hustle to do what we need to do. And last thing is just remember, zoom out and remember, here right now, we are in a social contract. Whether or not you want to participate or not, you're still living in a social contract. We're part of a city that has elected officials, that has a budget that is really, really, funded, like there is money there. And the social contract is that the elected officials and the money should be providing us with the resources, with the space to have life-affirming lives, to have life-affirming conditions. And the reality is that we don't. And we need to do something about that. We really do need to do something about that. And I want you to know that it goes beyond electing elected officials. Right now, elected officials are too damn comfortable taking $100 million from safety nets, from our safety nets, taking this much money from here and assigning money to people that don't need money, like developers and other people. So let's realize that those things need to change, and we have a role, and we can do something about that. And it's overwhelming, but let's make it happen. Let's start with step one. Switch your framework from saying there's more than access. Autonomy is what we're working here for. So,
yeah, thank you. Yeah, excellent. In the interest of time, and you also set me up now. My last question. Yes, I love this. Women supporting women. As we are looking out and we see the youth who are here, right? That is who we're talking to, but also in a way we're talking to our younger selves in many ways. Now, the knowledge that we have, the experience that we have, maturity. Just closing out very briefly before we open up to questions from the audience. What words of advice would you give to the youth that are here and or to your younger self? And then we'll open up to the audience for questions.
Sure. So the first thing is super easy. And I wish someone had told me this before. When you're young and you hang out with your friends' parents, and ask them what they do. Ask your friends' parents what they do. Just ask that question, because you'll find that, again, possibilities are based on who you have access to, like superstars and these sort of things that are out there that you don't know personally. They feel very inaccessible. But once you start having those conversations with people, and then you say, oh, okay, my parent does this, and how did they get there, and what was their path, and And, is there an opportunity to come to your job one day or to come to that organizing meeting? Or can I partner with you to get out there and bring my friends to be part of that campaign or be part of that rally or be part of that protest? So first, start figuring out who are the people in your circle. What do they do? They're more than someone's parents. And so start there. And then the other thing that I would say is sometimes you just need to pause and think about, what is the change that I want to make, regardless of how big it feels, and then, get on the computer and say, all right, who else is out there that's tackling this issue? And are there people in my city who are part of that change and solution? And then start there.
Yeah, I love that. I would add to that, and I think a lot of young people here, are connected perhaps to GALA and to programming here, but connect to things going on in the city where other young people are, right? Whether it's a formal program or it's an organizing group or it's something, that is gonna, again, there'll be sort of who are the adults around and ask questions. One of the things I will never say no to a young person who says, hey, do you have some time to talk? I'm trying to figure out something, right? Like, what do I want to do next? Where do I want to go? How do I want to live? And so, you have people around you who care about you as a human being and your future, and ask us to sit with you. Yes.
And I would tell my younger self and the young people around me that cultivate your inner voice. Work on, what do you think? What's important to you? Because life is so overwhelming these days, much more than it was in the 80s, I guess. But, cultivate, write in a journal or create a playlist, or think about, be careful what you listen to and how that runs in your mind, because that will become the voice either driving you or holding you back. So, and I was just watching the new movie about Frida Kahlo, and it's based on her journal, like what she left, her thoughts and her ideas. So you never know who might read that journal years from now.
That's a good one. One of the things I think we've been telling our daughter is that, Rosie. Turns out my puppy wants to say something too. Is that there's so many ways to be a girl. There's so many ways to be a woman. We don't say it in these words exactly, so that's why I was struggling with exactly how we say it. But for example, it's so interesting how quickly these norms set in, right? Even in preschool, she was 4. I remember the first time that she said, one of my friends at school said that girls have long hair and boys have short hair, right? And she came home with that idea to check it. And before we could say anything, I'm so proud that she was like, but that's not true, right? And I was like, exactly, that's not true. And then my wife presents as masculine and has short hair. So she said, because Baba has short hair. I was like, exactly. I'm like, and she's a woman and she has short hair. You can be whatever version of girl you want to be. You can be whatever version of woman you want to be. And I think that's something, again, I tell my 5-year-old, and I would tell the 50-year-olds and the 80-year-olds in my life as well, because I think that lesson, needs to keep getting repeated. We are constantly put upon by society around what we're supposed to be looking like, dressing like, acting like, speaking like, working like, being a comrade like, all the things. And there's so many versions of that you can be. So I think that's one of the things. And also to just always question things. to never be afraid to question things, as well as important, to not just take, this is for all young people, regardless of gender, that I feel is really important to continuously question. And I didn't go to a liberal arts school. I wish I did go to a liberal arts school, because I see it, my wife teaches at a liberal arts college. I see it through her students and through the way she teaches as well, this process of constant inquiry, of like always wanting to, and again, with my daughter when she was in preschool, I remember it was a nature preschool, an outside preschool, and the first day we got there to look at the school, there was a tree there, and there was a fruit on the tree. And my daughter picked up the fruit and she was looking at it. The teacher came out to greet us. The teacher could have very easily just said, "Yeah, that's a crab apple." Instead, she said to my daughter, "What do you think that is?" My daughter's like, "I'm not sure." She's like, "Where do you think it came from?" My daughter's like, "I don't know." She's like, "Look around." And so she looked around and she's like, "Oh, there's a tree there." She's like, "Do you see anything on the tree that looks like that apple? Or like that fruit, rather?" And my daughter said, "Yeah, there's some up there that look like that too." And she's like, "Well, what do you think that is?" She's like, "That looks like a crab apple." She's like, "Well, then this is a crab apple too." And I say this story not about crab apples or trees, but just to say that she led my daughter through a process of inquiry to come to the answer rather than just telling her the answer. She could have very easily just had a 2-second conversation and ended it. But that set up the framework, and I think that we, as people who are, I'm going to also say older, need to do that for younger people, that we are also not just giving the answers, but helping to guide them through to come to the answer themselves. So, and then for the young, Rosie, for the younger ones, I would say that to question yourself and to constantly, not just take the answer you're given, but say, are you sure that's a crab apple? Are you sure that's a crab apple tree? Just to extend the analogy. And to question the things that are being told to you, and maybe it's not the final truth. She likes that mic. She wants the mic. Sorry, go ahead, Tanya.
Thank you.
Super briefly, because this is really amazing advice my colleagues here have given. Advice that I will give myself and to the youth here is it's okay to do less. It's okay to do less. Especially in this environment where access to healthcare is difficult, whether it is because of resources or because of la cultura. It's okay to do less. It's okay if you don't go to that protest. It's okay if you don't become the youngest executive director in your family or whatever it is. It's okay. Just do less when you need to, because if you don't have the support that you need and you need to care for yourself, one time that you don't do something, it's not going to be the end of the world. So, do less.
I think that was a really good to end on for this part of the panel. Now we'd like to open it up to questions from the audience.
I'm just going to help by bringing the microphone.
All right, thank you so much.
So if you would like to
This is
ask a
hands.
question, I can bring you the microphone so everyone can hear.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Jancy Rivas. Muchas gracias por la representación que están haciendo todos ustedes y todos los cambios positivos que están haciendo para la sociedad. Pero más que una pregunta, es una reflexión. Mientras ustedes hablaban, en mi cabeza habían muchas cosas. Y uno de los cuestionamientos que me hacía mientras ustedes hablaban es que siendo mujeres, hasta ahora científicamente, somos las únicas, el único portal para traer vidas a este mundo. ¿Por qué tenemos que luchar por nuestros derechos? Somos nosotras quienes educamos, somos nosotras quienes construimos, somos nosotras quienes creamos, somos nosotras quienes unimos o separamos. Entonces mi reflexión es, estamos haciendo un gran trabajo en construir esta sociedad, en construir la vida, en construir el mundo, pero yo creo que debemos de hacerle un reseteo a las mentiras que nos ha dicho el sistema, porque nos han dicho que no podemos sin un hombre, porque nos han dicho que tenemos que pelear, que nos han dicho que infinidad de cosas que nos han dicho. Entonces la reflexión es empezar a hacer ese reseteo con los niños desde la casa, porque es un tema de educación y la educación solo nos puede dar en la casa. ¿Y quiénes somos las encargadas de nosotras. Así que es un trabajo grande que tenemos que hacer, empezar a resetear a nuestros hijos y a educar a las personas en la calle, a decirles que no somos desiguales. ¿Quién te dice de que somos diferentes? Somos seres humanos y no tenemos que competir. Entre hombres y mujeres, el sistema educativo nos ha dicho que en la educación todo es competencia, lectora, competencia, no sé qué. No tenemos que competir, eso es porque nos están reseteando. Tenemos que unirnos como humanidad, blancos, negros, indios, como quiera que sea. Pero el origen sexual, religioso, que sea, eso no importa. Somos seres humanos y como seres humanos tenemos que respetarnos y tenemos que avanzar de la mano, trabajar para todos juntos. Esa es mi reflexión. Muchas gracias.
No, you, Marcelina.
My question is, for the women of color on the panel, and as a woman of color, how has mainstream or traditional quote-unquote feminism hindered the change that needs to be made for women of color? I feel like sometimes, like, it doesn't cut it, it's not enough. That's all.
That's a good one. That's a good question.
Thank you.
The first thing that came to mind when you asked that is the fallacy that women are all together is, I think, what hinders us. And the 2016 election is a proof of that, where it was white women who voted Trump in, and that brought in a lot of the policies that ended up hurting women. So it's, I think that fallacy itself, the sort of thing that we keep getting told is what hinders us, and that we need to understand that there are other ways of building solidarity, and that it's not necessarily that we're all just automatically gonna all be together fighting the same fight. And if we keep believing that, then I feel like we don't speak up more and fight more and challenge that narrative. So that's the first thing that came up for me.
Hello.
Here, take this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would just add to that and saying that, sort of the historical voice of feminism has been a white feminism, and we know that to be a feminist, you can be a man or a woman, or that it's not gender based, but it's how you see rights for women, etc. But in order to change and move from that model of feminism, and to hear the feminist voices of other women, other persons of the global majority that live here, Black women, brown women, Asian women, is to move those voices to the center, because time and time again, those other voices, those non-white voices, are the ones in terms of feminism that make the considerations of those different parts of that intersectionality, because they cannot afford to separate themselves from their fullness, from being Black and female, and what their sexual orientations are, what their class is, what their education levels. They don't have the luxury of separating themselves from those. And so that feminism is a sort of enriched version of that, because the considerations they have to have is always based on that sort of full level of intersectionality.
Yes.
I was just going to say that similar to what the compañera said is that traditional feminism excludes the intersectionality that we all experience, and just the realization that we are not individuals that experience one issue at a time. When you're living, all the issues are hitting you. And yeah, there is feminism that says like, oh no, we're not focusing on that right now. This is what we're focusing on because this is what we're getting paid to do right now. So that happens, and when that happens, we have to realize that those are not our spaces, even if they look like cisgender women or women that, you know, or trans women. Well, actually, it's probably going to be most likely cisgender white women who are going to be doing that. So let me not say anything like that. But yeah, realizing that we are humans that don't experience issues one at a time. We experience everything at once.
Hi, my name is Marcelina Lopez. I am part of the group Youth Voices Transforming Community. And my question to you guys is, how have you used your strengths to help the community?
That's a great question.
I'll start.
Turn it off.
I think it's on.
Hello.
No, we turn it off. So
Where's the button? Okay. Thank you.
So,
It's too close. Too close.
So I'll use myself as an example because I went to law school, but I didn't really believe I could be a lawyer, right? And then 15 years later, I was a lawyer. It followed me, it haunted me until I achieved it. And I would say that, you know, I spent all my years as a lawyer, because I'm not lawyering now, but doing everything I could to take the systems that were supposed to help people and hold them accountable. So to push, to kick down the doors, to fight with people, literally scream at the director of the Department of Motor Vehicles, but that was what I did every day, and fight and fight and fight to make sure that if this is the rule, that you're following the rule and make sure the rule is fair. And you always have to call those things into question. So now I don't do that work, but I work with organizations that are supposed to serve poor people, organizations that are supposed to serve migrants, organizations that are supposed to, using the money they get from all the money that comes, you know, from the sky and the foundations to do what they're saying they're going to do. So that's a little bit of me.
I would say that it wasn't strength that I use. I use whatever, lo que salió. Sometimes it was perseverance, sometimes it was grit. But I think it was just realizing that, you know, the saying that carried me through the things that I've done in my life is like, si no yo, ¿quién? And like, if not me, then who? And I think as a 36-year-old woman now, 36 cisgender woman now, I feel so hopeful that I see so many people, that so many youth that are going to step in those spaces where I've been telling myself, si no yo quién, if not me who, and now I think like the work that I've done and the work that my communities have done and the communities that came before me have done are setting up the stage, setting up youth to be able to continue the work in the best way possible, where we're telling also youth, do not sacrifice all your life in here, please take care of yourself, and also move the work forward. And like I said, it wasn't strength all the time, because it's not only strength that we have, it's like so many different things. I dragged through many things in my life, kept going. I don't think it was strength, it was being cabeza dura sometimes, because like they said that I couldn't, so I did it. It was that. And like I said, I'm super hopeful because y'all are here and y'all are going to do that. And perhaps in a couple of years, I can stop being a full-time social justice, like a full-time backup support for social justice fighters, social justice change makers, and I can take on the role that I would have taken if racism wasn't a thing, if systemic oppression was a thing, and that is of becoming a full-time eater. Like I want to get paid to just eat out in the community, travel different spaces, different countries, and just try to go in there. Imagine that what we could do if we didn't have to do all of these different things, right? Such a beautiful thing. So let's have some joy.
I would say two things that when you were saying si no yo quiero, just remembering que yo no soy sola as well is I think the strength, like remembering I'm not alone, that I'm not the only one, which is not always easy, and sometimes you are the only one, and sometimes you have to be the one to speak out. But I think where your question was about supporting community and helping community, it was a lot of times seeking out that community and trying not to be afraid to do that, and trying not to be afraid to ask for help when I needed it to. So I think that's where that came from the drive to sort of support my community comes from the community itself. Looking like when I was first coming out, I came out, I feel like kind of late in my life. I was like 21, and I was in India actually. I was doing my grad program, and I had never actually in DC found a space of other queer women from India, from South Asia. And so I didn't come out because I didn't find people that looked like me and that, were part of my community. So I'm 10,000 miles away in India, and I knew that there was a group of lesbian and bisexual women in Bombay, and I was very, very afraid. It probably was like a month or two into my stay there that I finally got the courage to write an email to them and say, I'm here right now, I'm from the US, and the first time I wrote the word bisexual on the computer, typed it out, in an email, and it took strength, it took courage, it took overcoming my fear, but it also took me wanting to seek out my community so that I could help. And then since then, I have now served as the director of a South Asian LGBT organization. I fundraise for an organization that supports South Asian LGBT community members, right? I've gone from that young baby queer woman to now actually being a leader in the community and being able to support my community members. But it took overcoming the fear and saying, it's okay, I'm going to find help here, I'm going to find somebody else that's going to support me and help me. And there's always someone else is what I've learned.
Yeah, and that really kind of sort of resonates. What I was thinking too is, we don't do this work alone. I feel like everything I've been able to be part of that I think has made some kind of difference in the city has been through a collective of people joining together and being very generous with what they know and know how to do. And I think that goes back to always asking and again, everybody here on this panel clearly all has something very unique to offer, a knowledge, skills, and lived experience, and so it all matters, right? We need all of it. So it's also what you have, right? We need you, come, be part of this collective, and we'll do it together. So, thank you.
This will be our final question. There's another question.
Thank you.
Hola, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Carol y mi pregunta es, ¿cuál es el mensaje que le dan a los jóvenes que apenas llegan a los Estados Unidos?
Lo voy a decir en inglés y después Mr. Roebuck puede...
El intérprete.
Okay. So the question was, what's the advice you would give to young people who are coming to the United States? And it's a wonderful question and a broad question, so I'll just take a slice of that in the context of the theme for today. And just say that you're coming here and you're leaving a huge part of yourself behind. That's your family members, it's your home, it's a way of life that you've known. And so when you come here, think big, and also don't let the perception that there are barriers here that you cannot overcome because you are from another place. Don't allow that message to inhibit your dreams in any way. Just the fact that you got here means that you're strong enough and determined enough to reach your goals.
Yo voy también a decir algo muy similar, que tú perteneces aquí. You belong here also. You are part of this district. And algunas veces estamos como inmigrantes, estamos pensando en que vamos a regresar o no no podemos regresar, cuál es mi casa, cuál es mi hogar, dónde puedo usar mi voz y que dónde mi voz va, cuáles son las personas que van a escuchar mi voz también. Y la cosa es que si alguien está escuchando o no está escuchando, tiene que usar su voz, porque tiene una voz muy importante y muy poderosa, tiene que usarla. Y que las personas van a escuchar un día. Si no hoy, mañana, pues, pero van a escuchar si lo usas. Gracias. Como muchacha que llegó aquí a los 13 años y medio, en condiciones muy difíciles. Si tienes condiciones similares que son difíciles, las cosas mejoran. Eso es tener la esperanza que las cosas mejoran. Siempre hay alguien que va a estar ahí por ti y hay veces que ese alguien va a ser tú misma. Y pues que no te den por vencida, como te digo, hay veces de que uno tiene que de una forma u otra, aunque no sea caminando, pero gateando, como sea, llegarás. Y lo más importante es tener en mente una meta más o menos cortita, donde la puedas ver, y una meta que pienses que nunca vas a ver. Entonces la meta cortita te va a ayudar a llegar a lo que tienes que hacer primeramente, y la meta más alta, que va a estar más allá, va a ser tu esperanza. La esperanza que te va a ayudar a llegar donde tienes que llegar, a donde tú quieres llegar, ¿verdad? Pero la meta cortita es lo que te va a ayudar a asegurarte de que estás haciendo las cosas que tienes que hacer para ti y para quien sea que tú elijas, que quieras ayudar. Y también lo último es de que tienes que, aquí una cosa que se siente es un poco de, ¿cómo se dice? Freedom. Libertad, eso. Con acento se me olvida. Libertad. Hay un tipo de libertad que no tienen, por ejemplo, El Salvador, que no tienen otros países como El Salvador, que aquí puedes cuestionar las culturas, tu propia cultura, las cosas que te hieren aquí de parte de tu cultura. Por ejemplo, la familia, le dicen, bueno, la familia no siempre lo tiene que querer, y eso no es cierto. Eso no es cierto. Si la familia te hiere, tienes que estar ahí por seguridad, quédate ahí por seguridad, pero cuando ya no los necesitas, pues cuídate a ti misma. Entonces, sobrevive lo que tengas que sobrevivir, pero tienen opciones acá. Eso es la cosa que no tenemos en otros países, opciones. Aquí sí hay opciones, aunque difíciles, pero hay opciones. Así que ahí está. Sí, espero que eso haya tenido un poco de sentido.
Pues, con eso, wait, do you want English or Spanish? Yeah, okay. We are going to ¿tiene una pregunta? Para cerrar, ok, perdón, te toca.
Gracias.
Oso, ¿me escuchan ahí?
Ok, ¿y cuántos de ustedes se van inspirados hoy con estas historias? Gracias, aprovechamos para darles a ustedes valor y honra por estar en este espacio y contar sus historias, abrir sus corazones y empoderar a la comunidad, a los niños. Sé que todos se van hoy para la casa inspirados a seguir estas conversaciones, porque esto es la tarea. Esta es la tarea, seguir conversando con nuestras familias y ampliando todas estas experiencias que estas maravillosas mujeres han venido a entregar. También queremos agradecer a nuestros socios, aliados, patrocinadores que muy amablemente han contribuido para que esto sea realidad. Al Teatro Gala, gracias. Heidelberg, Young the Most Transforming Community, University City Fund, la oficina de la alcaldesa, del alcalde para los asuntos latinos y al restaurante Los Hermanos. Invitamos a ver la exhibición de arte de nuestra talentosa pintora Carmen Under. Nosotras por su presencia, gracias Carmen por sus contribuciones al arte y por todo lo que hace para la comunidad. Gracias. Y le damos la bienvenida para que pasen y disfruten de los ricos alimentos que tenemos. Gracias al restaurante Los Hermanos. Gracias a todos por acompañarnos esta noche y que tengan un feliz regreso a casa.